Hi, my name is Geetha Moorthy. Welcome to the Building Tomorrow Together podcast. I wanted to take this project on because as we come up on our 15th year at the SAAAC Autism Center, I'm grateful to all the incredible people I have met. In my 15 years of running SAAAC, I have been so lucky to work and collaborate some amazing people who have helped grow SAAAC, who have enriched my life personally, and who continuously make our world a better place. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our very first episode of Building Tomorrow Together podcast. As we are celebrating our 15 years at the SAAAC Autism Center, I would like to recognize few people and who I have met, like some amazing people we have met during the 15 years, and how they have made SAAAC grow, enrich my personal life, and also, they have been in the future, I think we are going to change the world together. So here we go. And I would like to, bring their ideas and to share their ideas and to make it a better place for everyone. So this is our very first episode, and I would like to introduce Dr. Shivajan Sivapalan, who has been with us for the past 15 years. And he has been, an asset, or I'm not too sure how to say that, but he has been with us for so long. And he has been a part of many of our projects, to start with the innovation for the MDoc project, mental health, the CARES program, and to push us to do national and international work together. And this is he's a star of the show today. And please welcome Dr. Shivajan Sivapalan. And hereafter, we'll be calling him Shiv.
Thanks, Geetha. Wow, I can't believe it's 15 years. That's longer than I've been married. No, it's been great. I've just realized, wow, 15 years, we've done a lot with SAAAC. SAAAC has come a long way. I think the first time I remember where we were at was when I first started to volunteer, and we were outside at one of these parks near your house. And I didn't know where SAAAC would go at that point. And it's just amazing to be now sitting at a studio here in Scarborough and having multiple sites. 15 years has been an experience. That's all I can say.
So when you started at the park, as you said, mm-hmm. What did you think? Where were you? You were a medical student, or have you?
Yeah, so at that point, I had just started residency. So I'm an international graduate, so I'd gone to school in the Caribbean and then came to the States. And I got lucky enough to match at the University of Toronto. So I just started my first year in family medicine. And it was interesting because although I loved family medicine, I still wanted to work with children. And I just didn't have as much opportunity in that program. And it was my aunt, who is one of your dance students, who said, "Hey, Shiv, why don't you come? There's this organization that's working with children on the spectrum." And I was like, children on the spectrum? At that point, honestly speaking, I didn't know what autism was. I didn't know the details around it. I've maybe read a bit about it in a medical book, but really had no experience. And so when she took me to that park, that was my first experience. And it was interesting because she had told me, she goes, "Trust me, when you get close enough to SAAAC, you're not going to want to leave." And yeah, after that point, I haven't left. It's been a journey. I'm surprised at how long I've been able to stay with one project, knowing my own personality. But it's been for me enlightening.
So I just want to ask you, what motivated you to do community medicine, and what are the benefits, and where do you see that going?
Well, so when I started, so even when I was in high school, what I found was you go to high school, they tell you to go volunteer. Everyone's like, "Oh, if you want to be a doctor, you should go volunteer at a hospital." I just didn't have a chance just because of commuting, my parents' work schedule. So what I ended up doing was actually volunteering at this almost like an academy where they would teach children, summer camps and so on. And they did a lot of community-based initiatives at that point. And that's what really got me enticed because I felt really passionate about it. If you asked me at that point what my future job would have been, it would probably have been teaching or going into something around that. But, things change. But that's really where I started finding my passion for helping those that were underserved or marginalized. And it's really difficult to really know what people experience unless you're working with them firsthand. And I think there's a lot of communities here out in Scarborough, in the greater GTA, that are underserved that no one really realizes their experiences. And I think if you really want to learn it, you have to go right to that front line. And I think that experience between the ages of 16 and 18, just before I went into university, was really what defined me on why I wanted to pursue community medicine.
Okay, so I'm just going back to your family. Can you tell me something about your family? Like how many siblings you have? Where did your family come from? Did they come from Sri Lanka, or were you born here? Can you tell me something?
Yeah, so my parents, they're both Sri Lankan Tamils, and they immigrated initially to Nigeria. That's where me and my sister were born. So I used to have one sibling, a younger sister, who's now a lawyer out in New Brunswick. But they went there mainly because obviously the civil war was starting in Sri Lanka, and just out of safety and job security, they were professors out in Nigeria. Most of my cousins were actually born there. And then, there was some civil unrest in like 1987, 88 in Nigeria, and we immigrated here to Canada as refugees. And I know that's difficult for a lot of people to say, but I'm actually very proud to say that about my parents because I know the struggles they went to. I wouldn't say I fully appreciated their struggles when I was younger. When you're a teenager, when you're in your early 20s, you want to disagree with your parents. But looking back, I know how much they went through and how much their experience of making the most of what they had really helped define me and helped me understand the value of just helping others, being there for others, and not just valuing the materialistic stuff. And I think that's carried on for both me and my sister. And hopefully that'll carry on for my children now.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think they must be very, very proud of you right now. Because, when you came like 15 years ago to the park to now what you're doing, and you took a lot on you too, especially with SAAAC. So how are you balancing between your work and the SAAAC, like when you were volunteering with us? And also you got married after you joined SAAAC, and then now you have children as well. So can you talk something about the work-life balance, how you have been doing it?
Well, when I first started volunteering at SAAAC, I would say it was just, the weekends we would go to the park. But then as we started to grow, it became very, we kind of met every single day. We would meet in the evenings, we'd meet on the weekends, really try to establish that organization and build that structure. And I remember at that point, I just loved it because really I only had my residency at that point. There was nothing significant going on in my life, and this SAAAC was everything. And I made great friends there, friends that I'm still close with now. And then just coincidentally, that's where I met my wife. And we got married. And it was interesting after that because of how we met at SAAAC and how we became so close at that point. We always remembered that we should never be away from SAAAC. SAAAC is something that's integral to how we've been together, how we've grown up as a couple and now as with a family, that SAAAC is always going to be there for us. And what I remember initially was after we got married, I was still doing the full, okay, let's be there up till 2 a.m. sometimes on certain days or on the weekends. But after having children, I really started to realize, okay, we need to start to balance that. But it wasn't taking time away from SAAAC. It was more of trying to figure out my work situation. So was that, meaning I need to cut back on certain hours, going to the clinic? Was that really focusing on, shifting my clinic closer to being in Scarborough versus where I was initially in Bowmanville? I think that's where me and my wife really started to figure that out. And I think it's something that I'm continuously working at. Finding that work-life balance is always evolving. especially once you have children, as children get older, get into school, it's not as easy as just saying, oh, we just need to eliminate things. It's more of like, you need to balance what you're really passionate about, as well as balance, okay, that necessity to make a living for your kids.
Thank you so much, Shiv, for doing that. Because, I know you have taken a lot of projects on our end. So I would like to just ask you a few questions on that one. Can you explain to me about, which I know about MDoc, but the audience who are watching, what is MDoc and where are we taking that, and, the whole process of it?
Well, the MDoc, that's an interesting project. So it's a project that we really never thought of at SAAAC. Initially, with anything that we do at SAAAC, I think what we really realize is when there's a need or there's a gap in services, that's where SAAAC fills it. And it was interesting because when I first started at SAAAC, just with that medical background, what I noticed was there was a lot of parents coming to SAAAC without a diagnosis, asking, does SAAAC do a diagnosis? And at that point, we would just kind of redirect them back to their family doctor, their pediatrician, and ask them, oh, get a referral, and this is the process. The sad part that we really started to notice was families would come back a year later or even 6 months later and still not have a diagnosis, still just as confused. And that's where I think us and the SAAAC team, and I'm really going to credit a few people in terms of Dr. Mohammed Zuberi and Rohan George and Kingston Yogendran, in terms of really putting together something that, hey, how can we make sure these families don't get lost? If I were to tell you what the typical pathway looks like, especially for a family that's just recently immigrated to Canada, it can be very confusing. It involves finding a family doctor, getting a referral, going to a developmental pediatrician, getting an assessment that may take multiple visits. So what we wanted to do is let's streamline this and let's ensure that in that pathway, we can help them really navigate all of those hurdles and ensure that there's always support for them. And what we were able to show with our MDoc, which, cool name, I really like it because you think of mobile doc, but it stands for Mobile Developmental Outreach Clinic. What we really tried to do was we were able to reduce the wait times. And why were we able to do that? Because we saw children sooner, we saw children and we were able to screen them with better tools. And then the information we provided to the specialist was much more detailed than what you would get with a typical family practice. So what happened with these children and families was they were able to get a diagnosis instead of waiting 30 to 31 weeks, which was normal in Ontario about 3-4 years ago. They were able to get a diagnosis in 15 to 16 weeks. And they were extremely appreciative. Most of those families now come to SAAAC and always remember that experience that they had through that MDoc.
Okay, so after the diagnosis, so I think many families are going through a little bit of anxiety and depression and, mental health issues. So I know that you work with some of the students at your workplace. It's a different thing. But then also for the parents, the families, those who have a child on the spectrum. And you are interested in the mental health services too. And can you tell me, what is it that you're interested in and how can we, work together to reduce those stress and anxiety?
I think we noticed very early at SAAAC the issue around mental health was something that was growing. And the focus has always been, back then, was really helping the child, right? Whether it be behavioral services, speech, and OT. But what was really getting neglected was the parents. And at that point, we really started to think about, okay, how do we help families and caregivers with their own mental health? I remember parents coming to me and pulling me aside at SAAAC during the session and be like, I've been feeling really tired. My neck is really stiff, feeling overwhelmed. Me and my husband or my wife haven't really been talking too much. Like, what can I do, right? I feel overwhelmed. This is just so much. And we noticed this more frequently right after a new family would come in, just recently after a diagnosis. And then we realized there was nothing available. We would typically tell them, oh, can you connect with your family doc to get a referral to a psychiatrist or seeing a therapist or a psychologist? And there wasn't anything that was readily available or financially feasible for a lot of our families. And that's where we really started to think about, okay, how can we support these families? And that's where I met Dr. Kira Vimalakandan, a clinical psychologist. And we really started building that framework of CARES, which is that caregiver support program. It's interesting, though, when we look back now where CARES is, and CARES is all across Ontario, and we're thinking of going nationwide, is how we initially started with focusing on South Asian families, but we didn't change the material. And the material now we notice is just cross-culturally applicable. Like a lot of families from whichever ethnic background, religious background, find this really useful. And we've now found it even more effective for siblings. We found it really effective for grandparents. So it's something that we want to continue to grow. And that's where I see really that mental health support being in Canada. It's really being something that's accessible, that's affordable, and that's something that is impactful in the sense of really helping families or those that need those services connect with others that share that same experience. And without that, I find like some of the services that exist right now don't really address that. And that's why you get a lot of people dropping out after one session or two sessions.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain to me about the structure of the program and any success stories you have from the SAAAC CARES program?
Yeah, so our program is an 8-week program. It typically is in a group setting. We have trained facilitators, and our facilitators are unique. We try to recruit facilitators that are not therapists, that are not psychologists, that are not doctors. We really wanted to make this like a hands-on experience where we are training those who have had shared experiences. And what we found with that was it allowed, especially families that had a lot of stigma around mental health, connect easier. When they see another parent or they see someone that they can relate to, they're more likely to engage and they're more likely to stay involved in those sessions. The problem before, we tried doing it where it was, for example, me and Kira trying to do these sessions. And we noticed parents would just come in after 1 or 2 sessions of just asking us about, what caused their child's autism, how could they help with therapy. We noticed that they weren't focusing on their own mental health. Then when we started bringing in other parents and we started making parents or other types of facilitators there, we noticed they were more likely to open up. They were more likely to share. And now our sessions have, they're 8 weeks. They typically run an hour. That's on the short end. Typically, these sessions run an hour and a half to 2 hours. We've done it both virtually and in person. And like I mentioned, we've now scaled across Ontario, and we're really trying to get it into other provinces now.
So I know about the success stories, like even I heard a lot about success stories about the CARES program, especially during the COVID time. And there was one of our families, the son got the COVID and he was at the hospital, and the parents couldn't even see their son. And I think I was talking to one of the fathers, and then he was telling me that how he remembered the CARES, the program structure, and then he kind of, that made him relax more. And so thank you so much for that, because I think many, many parents out there are very, very excited, and we are very thankful. And I see some of the families are coming back again to the program because they really love the program.
No, and that's exactly what I remember is these families that we initially were in a CARES group 4 or 5 years ago are still friends right now, right? And like you just mentioned, that great example of how they remember some of the skills that they learn, right? That they still use them now, right? And COVID really exacerbated a lot of that isolation that sometimes families feel after a diagnosis, especially when you can't go to a center to meet other families. You're doing everything virtually during that social distancing, during that aspect where COVID had really hit its peak. I think where families really benefited from CARES was this gave them a time for themselves just to focus on themselves away from everything. We just recently restarted CARES in person, and this group of normally when we recruit 15 families per group, normally 10 will show up on the first day. In this case, all these families showed up, and we're into week 5, and they're continuously staying there, right? And that is something that speaks volumes to how they're really connecting with each other. I think it was on session 2, they all asked us, can we share our own personal information with each other so we can always be in touch? And I think that's the value of CARES, is really building this support group that isn't reliant on treatment centers or networks that provide therapy.
Okay, so now let's move to another section, what you're working on. It's about the toolkit creation.
Yeah, so the toolkits, again, something that we didn't see a need for initially until, again, we started hearing it from not only agencies, but parents as well. Their experiences during their diagnostic process could have been better. I know as a family physician that patient, physician relationship is such an essential component, because if you don't have that great relationship, patients aren't going to follow through on what you recommend. They're not going to show up for follow-up appointments. They may not get any testing that you recommended, and their overall health is going to deteriorate. So we found, that there are certain strategies that we can, recommend to both physicians, therapists, frontline staff that can really help improve that relationship. The other aspect we noticed was there's this cultural nuance. And I think SAAAC, what the one benefit was SAAAC was we were always culturally diverse. We had a diverse staff. We supported diverse families. So a lot of us, I think, didn't realize that some of the techniques that we were using really genuinely were very culturally relevant. And I think for us being able to put that into concrete suggestions or guidelines was really essential. And now I think we're one of the leaders in culturally competent training. We've been able to create toolkits to help diagnosticians, frontline staff better support South Asian, Black communities, Tagalog speaking, Mandarin, and Cantonese speaking communities. And we continue to evolve that type of that type of training. I think hopefully in the future, this isn't something that is only done through SAAAC, but it's something that's done through all these agencies, where we at SAAAC, I think, can really provide our insight based on the experiences we've had.
Okay, so because you're doing all these important work, like, have you been recognized or have you got any awards, which we don't know about?
Yeah, no, my wife always tells me, she goes, great job. So, I mean, that's always fabulous. My wife saying she loves me and she tells me how great I am. But I think the thing that really stood out to me more recently was I received the Canadian College of Family Physicians Award of Excellence for one of the projects that I did, which wasn't related to SAAAC. It was more of international students and how to better support that underserved population. But more recently, there was a joint award that was between the college as well as the College of Psychiatric Association. And that was for the best small grassroots organization that supports mental health. And that was for our CARES program. And it's a national award. And we really, I was just surprised that we got that. We had applied for it. I didn't think we really, had a chance. And we just found out recently, and we'll be receiving that award in November. But those are two that really have stood out to me over the last year or so. I've never been a guy that likes recognition. I typically like to be in the shadow. Even doing this podcast, there was a lot of pressure to put on me to do this. But the reality is, I think recognition speaks volumes to why a project is successful. Right?
Definitely. No, this is whatever you are doing is so great, and congratulations on those awards. But the thing is, I think you deserve more awards than that. So when you get an award or when you get the recognition, have you thought about celebrating? Or if you were going to celebrate, who do you celebrate with?
So it's interesting because when I received these two awards, so one of them is in person in Vancouver and another one is coming up in Montreal. And I'm finding every excuse in the book to not go, to not attend, and find someone else to attend on my behalf. I think it's the way I was brought up by my parents. It's more of that aspect of just, and I don't want to say being humble, but meaning I just never like to be in that spotlight. I'd rather because to build any of these projects, it takes a team, right? And even though, for example, with some of these awards, it'll just have my name on it or me and Kira's name on it. I think the reality is it takes way more people and an organization to really support that. And I really prefer awards that would just address that organization. So when it comes to celebration, typically it's a very quiet celebration. It's me and Tanya maybe ordering out food and watching Netflix, and that's all we tend to do. I don't like to make it a big deal. And that's something that I've grown up with. My parents have grown up with, even when I was, when I graduated from med school, finished residency, very minimal celebration. And that's not something that I wish would change. That's just how I am. And I see that with my kids as well. And it's something that I don't anticipate it ever changing in the future.
I guess that's the mentality of Tamil parents too.
Yeah.
Because when you score 98 marks, and the parents will ask you where are the two, right? So you want to be successful. Your parents want it to be like that. I think that's the way we were brought up. But I think what I have learned is even you had to celebrate small successes too. And that's what we are telling our families here, right? And I think that's important because that will give you the motivation to go to the next level. And you have been there without celebrating itself. So that's a really good thing. But I hear you mentioned about the international students, that award you were talking about. That made me think we have been doing international project too. So can you talk about that?
So that's something I'm really passionate about. So what I've really found with the international population is there's, again, gaps, right? I remember as early as 2012, 2013, we used to get emails about agencies in Uganda, Rwanda, Sri Lanka, parts of India, asking for doing what we do here at SAAAC. Can we build that out there, right? And initially we were building ourselves out here. There was just not enough infrastructure and staff for us to go do it there. But I think in 2019, 2020, where we really started to establish that, okay, we have established what SAAAC is here. We know what it can be going forward and how we can grow. And we knew the process of how to get to this point. And I think that was extremely useful when we did our first international project in Sri Lanka, in Venni, Klunuchi area, where we went and were able to help and support multiple schools that had children, not just that were on the spectrum, with multiple other disabilities, neurocognitive issues. And we were able to train those teachers. Sadly, COVID hit and we weren't able to go back. But I think that's what we're working towards now, is really being able to go back and help reinforce some of those strategies and really build a curriculum and structure that can help families there and teachers there really support their children better. And I think that's where SAAAC is going to be the most useful. I really think the big, broad picture of SAAAC is really that global expansion, where you take this model of how SAAAC was built and really place it all over the world.
So are you working on your language now, Tamil? Because I think next time you're going to, I heard.
Yes, my Tamil skills are improving. My recent trip to Switzerland, and where everyone there will only speak Tamil, helped me drastically improve. You could ask my wife, you could ask my parents since coming back how much my Tamil has improved. So it's gone from just saying Vanakkam Appa and Amma to much more. I think that's something that's also that experience of being able to go back home and be able to really relate and see how different things are, right? I think we hear everything on the news. We may see videos on YouTube. But I think until you go back, you won't really know. And I think from just hearing it from other volunteers, hearing it from other organizations that have gone back home, I think that experience is such a life-altering experience. And I think it's such a valuable experience for everybody.
I really want to, touch base on that one too, because I went to Sri Lanka in 2019 for the first time after many years. And when we were working at Klinuchi, how when people visit Sri Lanka, come back, and they always say, oh, everything is fine, everything is good. But when we visited these rural areas and we found out, there are so many families are struggling. And their number one thing is poverty. And then after that is the mental health issues. And, and also, the way, it's been there is they don't call it autism or ADHD or any other thing. They just put it as mental retardation. What do you think about that?
No, and that's, it's sad to hear. And I think, a part of me goes, I'm not surprised. But another part of me goes, it's extremely sad, especially since we are told here that there's a lot of support that goes back home. There is a lot of, agencies that go and do this. but if nothing's really changing, is what these agencies doing actually effective? And that whole aspect around like the use of that terminology to define autism, I think is something we also have to, from a cultural standpoint, understand and not judge, but go, okay, where did this come from? And how do we change that mindset? Like I remember, Geetha, when we first started here at SAAAC, 15 years ago, a lot of families were using that same terminology here when they got that diagnosis. They would, because that's that aspect of culture around it. Like this is the terminology. There was no word in Tamil that really defined what their child was experiencing, or the challenges their child had. And I think when you go back home, these are some of those nuances that we need to like better understand, right? And not judge families or teachers or professionals over there for using it, but help them understand there might be slightly better ways, or, understand why that terminology, so we can be comfortable with, okay, this is how, while we're operating here, this is what we're going to do, right? I think the other aspect with working back home is not overwhelming parents. And I think that's what, we did when we did the needs assessment initially in 2019, was we didn't want to give all of this training to parents and be like, hey, you need to do this. If their focus right now is putting food on the table, ensuring that they can, just support their family to survive, I don't think, it's feasible for them to suddenly be like, oh, we're going to do some ABA, we're going to do caregiver-mediated therapy, we're going to do speech therapy. But on the other hand, I think the schools there have that those resources where they want to help, right? Where they're like, okay, these kids are with us for this many hours. How can we make that experience better for them? How can we help with those challenges? What was really interesting, though, and I wanted to bring this up with you, was that when we did those virtual sessions initially back in, I think it was 2020, where we couldn't go back and we were working with those teachers, I remember the one time we did the dance and the arts sessions virtually. That was the most popular sessions. We saw not only the parents more engaged and the students dancing and doing this, but we saw the teachers really excited. Do you feel that the arts and dance aspect, when it comes to therapy, not just here in Canada, but back home, is underappreciated?
I think so. Because there, even when I was growing up, I know, when I wanted to have my arangetam, I had the first arangetam because my brothers were younger too. At that time, when I had my kuchipudi arangetam, my brothers were against for that. It was not treated as a good thing to dance on stage in front of all the people. I think it has changed now, but still it's not the thing that you want to do, but that's what you enjoy. Like dance is something what I find it, because that's how the whole SAAAC was started too, in my basement, teaching dance. But then, how that is more very close with occupational therapy. That's what we are trying to, bring it together now, give those evidence, right? Like the eye contact, or the movements, gross motor, fine motor skills, like balancing, everything is in the dance. And I think we need to teach, educate, and empower all the families here as well as back home in Sri Lanka or any other countries too. I think it's a great idea to do it. As a family physician, what do you think?
So what I realized, so I used to teach piano for the longest time through the Royal Conservatory. I got up to about grade 10, and my wife, she plays classical violin, and I also learned the mridangam. So music has always been part of us, and across all my cousins as well as my relatives, especially I would say my generation, music was such an essential component, and for exactly those same reasons. We found it helped us focus better. It gave us a way to really deal with stress, anxiety. It also helped us really hone some of our skills that we didn't know we had, right? And when I see the kids here at SAAAC, especially when we, had the concert, the Silver Linings concert, it was amazing. The children sang beautifully. They the one child that played the violin. It was such an extraordinary event. It was probably one of the best concerts I've actually gone to. And I sat there and I was like, but here are kids in Sri Lanka who have just as much talent, right? But no one's seeing that, right? And especially with arts and music being such an integral part of South Asian culture and Sri Lankan culture, it would be great to see that on more of an like global scale, because I think when I saw those parents being able to see their children dance or draw, and seeing some of what the children have been able to do here, it really gave these families hope, right? Because maybe they're not thinking of their child being able to get a job or make a living, but they're seeing that child being able to draw and dance and really perform and showcase that within that community. I think being able to really highlight that to the larger audience, especially those that are living here, would be such a benefit long term.
I think that's our dream too. Like, like as you mentioned about the silver lining, I'm going to promote this one now like on the podcast because, like we are having on March 8th, we are having the second musical coming up. I'm not too sure of the name yet, but then, like it's a International Women's Day too, the same day. So we are going to actually, like bring out a mother who has been supportive to the girl who is on the spectrum. That's the whole storyline. I don't want to give out everything right now, but keep that date available, March 8th.
No, I'm definitely keep that, because I think that kind of program, that kind of concert, that kind of show, I think would really change people's perceptions, as well as I really think it's the best form of awareness. Because when I talk to families, a lot of times they're not sure, right? They're always looking for, what can my child do? Like, what is the future of my child, right? And it's sometimes very difficult to give them that and really explain it to them, because we can't predict the future. But for them to be able to showcase some of that skills and learn that and know, hey, my child can do this, I think it's a feeling, me being a parent now of 3 children, knowing how much when I see my youngest one wanting to play the piano, it brightens my heart. It makes me so happy. It makes me like, oh my God, like one of the 3 of them loves doing this. This is great. And I think for a lot of parents, that's something that we underappreciate. And that's where I wish more and more agencies would actually take on that aspect of really promoting the arts and the dance.
That's great. I know like we are kind of deviating from like talks to the art side because we both love arts, but that's okay. Like, what's your vision for the future in terms of community medicine and expansion of any of the programs, what we talked about, or like any new projects or initiatives that you would like to work?
So I think, from the programs that exist right now, I would love to see our MDoc be the community outreach of every diagnostic hub that's out there, right? That would be great. Being that outreach where we can go into the community, do like more thorough screenings and provide really thorough information for the diagnostic hubs, and so that they can reduce their wait lists, reduce their wait times, and really help engage with the larger community abroad. I think that would be amazing. And being able to do that across Canada would be the next step, right? In terms of CARES, I think CARES is one of those projects now that I feel like it's running itself. I don't want to give, devalue Kira and my role in that, but I feel with CARES, it's really starting to grow to that point where we can see that everywhere. I'm not just saying in Canada. I really do see that being useful across, North America, Europe, everywhere across the world, because I do see that model where it's not resource intensive, where it's easily scalable, being available everywhere. In terms of our international project, I would love to see more of what we do here at SAAAC being transferred to communities where there's no resources or limited resources. That's where I think SAAAC excels. If we were able to do that in 2 or 3 more countries, I think over the next 5 years, I think that would be a huge accomplishment. For my own personal growth and well-being, what I'm looking forward to doing is really working on not only those projects, but supporting really international students, because I've noticed that at SAAAC now, a lot of the employees now were international students, and they're coming here and they're doing either placement or they're full staff here. And just knowing all their struggles that they go through and knowing the hardships that they go through and sometimes how the media demonizes them, I would really love to help support them from not just a health standpoint, but really help them navigate some of the hurdles that they're facing right here in Canada.
Wow. It's like you have got very ambitious future there. But that's good. So I had to ask you one question. It's like, what's your favorite way to unwind and recharge?
Okay, so this is for everyone out there that loves playing basketball. That is always been my way of unwinding. Even when I was like 10 years of age, in the middle of winter, I would go outside of my backyard, and my dad had a small basketball net there, snow covered. Sometimes it was just shorts and shoes on or boots on, and I would just shoot around. For me, that is the biggest way for me to unwind. Or nowadays with my 3 kids, it's just being able to play board games with my children. I never appreciated board games when I was younger, like Monopoly or Parcheesi's or anything. But now I've really realized how much that really connects family, and how much children and just their perspectives on things not only helps you relax, but it gives you great ideas. Sometimes these kids can come up with ideas that I'm like, oh, I didn't look at it that way. So that's how I unwind.
Okay. And what are the challenges you have faced throughout like your career?
So, oh, I could write a book on that. The reality is with being from a Tamil family, there's always challenges on expectations, right? Our parents came here without much or nothing at all. And there is that struggle and that emphasis to always succeed. And success is highly related to academic success. Like you said, 98 isn't good enough, right? So I think that was the biggest challenge, because I was more worried about getting that 100 and pleasing my parents than it was to enjoy the moment and enjoy just going to school and learning. And I think I only started to really learn that was when I was in med school, right? I had multiple hurdles. Like, university was not the easiest for me. There was stuff that happened personally with family and so on that really added to that. But what I look at is every one of those hurdles strengthens you. And especially when people doubt you and tell you that you're not going to do this, there's no way you're going to make it, you're never going to be a doctor. I think that motivation really inspires me. And I think you've noticed that, especially with SAAAC, when people would tell us, where's SAAAC going? It's such a small organization. Where are you going to be now? I would never rub that in people's faces, even though I would love to. I think the reality is that motivates me, right? That aspect of people telling you can't do it, or there's no solution to this problem. It's always going to be there. I think that really drives me, right? So those hurdles, I look at them as learning experiences, and in some cases, that motivational aspect.
No wonder we are friends, because I work that way too. If somebody challenges me, I want to do more than what we are doing right now. So that's why, like the 15 years been there already. What message or advice would you like to give or convey to our listeners to wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I think the biggest message that I want to say to everyone out there is just based on my personal experience. There's so many messages I could give them about how awareness and screening and all these benefits. But I think something that's forgotten is this involvement with community, right? I think humans in nature love being around each other, right? And value that aspect of being part of this community. And this is even more strongly related to certain cultures. But I think sometimes we forget to do that. We're so overwhelmed with work. We're so overwhelmed with all these tick box things that we need to do. We go to the groceries. I got to pick up the kids. I got to take them to classes. That we forget that we don't spend enough time. And I think the best experiences are those when you're able to volunteer. Like that, for me, like I said, that volunteering aspect at SAAAC that started me off on this journey is something that is such an invaluable experience that I don't think a lot of people have access to. And we can easily tell you, the number of volunteers that come to SAAAC and stay at SAAAC, that speaks to how much this experience is. So that would be my message to everyone, is if you have that chance to really engage and be part of some community initiative for whatever passion that you have, I think it's something that's going to carry on to you lifelong. It'll change how you look at life. It'll change how you value certain things. But it'll also give you some purpose. And for me, SAAAC's given me purpose for the last 15 years, and I hope it'll continue to give me purpose for the next, I don't know, another 15 at least. But that's something that I think everyone else should also experience.
Thank you so much, Shiv. But I have one more question. For you to do all these things, there has to be an influential person in your life. Like who is that person?
So I'm going to say two people. So one, and this is not to devalue my mother, because Amma has been everything to me. She's always there, but she's my heart. So I'm not, because I always tell her she's everything. But the person that probably really influenced me was my appa. He, I would say, just like most Tamil boys, when they're growing up, they may get into a lot of arguments with their appa, may feel like their appa is saying everything wrong. And then you hit this certain age and you realize, oh, wow, everything he really said was right. And everything that he was doing was for you. And maybe growing up in a different culture was why you had that conflict. But I look back, and if he didn't push me the way he did, he didn't say the things he said to me to motivate me, and wasn't there, for me financially, even like when I needed money for medical school or I needed money for residency, there was never any question. He would do whatever it took to get that for me. I value everything he did. But the other person, because you need someone to motivate you and push you, but you need someone to always be there in case you fall. And the person that was there always from the beginning has been Tanya. And Tanya was there when I've fallen multiple times. And she's never been that person that sits there and pities me. She goes, no, get up, let's go. We're going to do this. And I think those two people, in addition to my mom, have been the most influential people in my life.
That's great. Like maybe we should do a musical based on a dedication to the dads. Usually people always talk about mom. Mm-hmm. And I see the first time, I'm hearing, somebody is more about the dad. But of course, mom is always in the picture, right? Because without the mom, I don't think the dad can support, or exactly. Dads are always a little bit more
Yeah, I look at it as your amma's, she's always there. Regardless of how much you may yell at her or be upset, she's always there. Even right. Think about even I always look at my three boys, and if they don't like her, when they're 3 or 4 and they don't like their food and they throw everything on the floor, right? And she'll get upset, but she'll get them a new set of food and she'll make sure they eat, make sure they drink their milk. Mothers are these beings of just compassion and empathy that continuously just help you.
It doesn't matter whatever you do.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Mothers are always there, always, and you're extremely right. Without them, in my case, my dad wouldn't be able to do half of what he did. Right?
I think I would like to thank your parents for bringing up a young man like you. We are so proud of you, proud of your parents, and of course proud of Tanya. We all know Tanya because she has been a volunteer with us and such a sweet person. So thank you so much to the whole family. And thank you for being a collaborator, a colleague, and a good friend to me. And I know, just off the thing, I know I call you all the time. If I need need something, or my daughter will be calling you for her things, or any families, when they come to me, they go, can you call Dr. Shiv? And I call you, and anytime, it doesn't matter whether it's a Friday night or Saturday or Sunday, or even it's your birthday. I called you, I know, for some reason, and you were there for us. And so thank you so much for being there. And let's meet again in another episode. Vanakkam.